All right. We'll call to order. The Board of Directors meeting for the San Ynez Valley Groundwater Basin Eastern Management Area and Groundwater Sustainability Agency held here at the San Ynez Community Service District on Thursday, February 26th at 4 p.m. Meeting start time. Can you do a quick roll call?
Director Circle. Here. Director Hartman.
Here.
Director Merriman. Here. Director Joes. Here. Chair Arona.
Here.
Present.
Okay, so on the agenda, there is a change. So we're going to introduce public comment where members of the public can speak or address the board relating to any non-agenda topic, but we're introducing the consent items. So any topic on consents which are items 3A, B, and C. Public's welcome to speak and address the board. You'll be allotted 3 minutes, just for efficiency of time, and no action will be taken on the board on those items for which you choose to speak. Do we have any members of the public that would like to speak? Should we address anyone online?
If there are any members of the public online who would like to make a public comment, please raise your hand. No, it's a raise one.
Okay, great, thank you. So we'll move on from public comment to item 3. So we're introducing consent items. This is in the spirit of keeping our meetings efficient, even though this is kind of an off-schedule agenda meeting. We're moving in this direction to take items that are information-oriented, that would typically be approved and would not necessarily require, we've seen that before, and not necessarily require debate, discussion, or we might interpret them as being non-controversial. So we're moving them to consent items, which means 2 things. It means we can approve them in a single motion as a single item, if you will, on the agenda. And it means that if you choose, it's not taking away any of your rights as a board member, but if you would choose to remove an item and open it for discussion, you would eliminate it from the motion and just ask to review it as if it were a typical agenda. So we have 3 items on the consent, item A, B, and C. The one other comment I would make by introducing this change in our processes. I couldn't find in our bylaws if we are okay with introducing consent. If the board feels that we need to approve this step in our procedures, we can vote on that if everyone's comfortable. And knowing that you still have the right to pull an item from consent, we can simply approve these items. And we're working to make sure that there's enough time in the publication of the agenda so board members can review the details in the packet.
Would the proper procedure be to recommend approval and then discussion, or?
If you want to discuss something, the recommended steps would be to say, I'd like to pull an item. So we'll open the consent items to see if anyone has any questions, comments, or would like to pull an item for discussion.
I'm going to approve the 3 items.
I'll second. Okay, good. Do the roll call.
Well, I think we still need to take public comment on consent.
We did it in the public comments. I moved it into the public.
Okay. All right.
So if we can take it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes 5-0.
Okay, we're achieving that already. We're on item 4. Okay, so this is where we introduce our input and feedback from the CAG. Dan, do you want to introduce that item?
Yeah, just briefly, as the board knows, and hopefully some members of the audience, we've sort of with 2026, we've incorporated a new process where we are intending to have alternating CAG and then subsequent board meetings and really engage the CAG as sort of our sounding board for different EMA GSA items, get their input, get their questions, and then be able to bring those items to the board with having had the CAG the opportunity to review and provide input. And then, one way to really facilitate that, at the last meeting, the board just, came up with the concept or proposed the concept that the CAG would, at each meeting, select a lack of a better term, a reporter, who would then at the subsequent board meeting provide a summary to the board on the discussion at the previous CAG meeting. And so for this meeting, Gay Infante has volunteered to report off from the CAG meeting and report to the board on items discussed at the last CAG meeting.
Thank you, Dave.
Okay, well, we had met on February 12th, virtually, and we had a 2.5 hour meeting, a lot of discussion. The first major topic that we talked about was photo registration and recording platform. I know we're going to have more discussion about that later on, but the CAG, so we discussed actually only two of the platforms that were proposed, and the two, of course, are MLJ and the conservation districts platform. The general support on the CAG that MLJ is probably the vendor that they would like to have. Depending on for their evaluation. It was suggested during the meeting that live demonstrations might be useful for reaching a final decision. Some of the features of the conservation district platform have not yet been implemented. Primarily, a feature that MLJ does have already, which is allowing developers to and register their wells and input their usage directly to the platform. So that would pose some risk if the development and implementation of the conservation district platform is delayed and implemented. A long period for sure. In addition, privacy and well information, particularly for the members in the white area, would be a concern if an exclusive EMA GSA platform is not selected. EMA GSA is the agency responsible for groundwater management in accordance with SIMPA. We all know that. And the CAG agrees that the EMA GSA should have full ownership, access, privacy, and use of its data. The conservation district is responsible for surface water and the Seminas River, including the underflow. However, 36% of the EMA GSA area zone overlaps with the conservation district's boundaries, and the groundwater pumpers within zone E are still registering their wells and reporting usage to the conservation district, as well as paying the conservation district for their water. And they're now also receiving charges and paying pumping fees for the GSA. The CAG agrees that the situation needs to be addressed and resolved. CAG agrees that payment to both agencies by groundwater pumpers is inappropriate. The remainder of the groundwater pumpers within the EMA GSA, comprising approximately 64% of the GSA area, are the white area, which is of course outside the conservation boundaries. There's concern among the CAG that and others actually, the current dual processes for well registration reporting within the GSA will cause confusion among well owners throughout the EMA about which platform they're to use and to whom they should report for usage. Therefore, a single platform for every pumper within the EMA GSA well registration and reporting is preferable. The next topic we discussed was CAG membership and process. The CAG agreed that tracking attendance at the CAG meetings is appropriate. There were only 4 members of the CAG at this particular meeting. CAG members are interested in filling the vacancy for the tribal representative as well. And the CAG members agreed to update their information concerning their stakeholder registration for the sake of transparency and to provide that to the CAG staff. The remainder of the meeting was updates on programs and initiatives, and a number of additional agenda items were briefly presented and discussed as follows. The 1-year annual report is being by GSI, and GSI is currently working with staff to prepare the ag water demand analysis. upon completion of the annual report of GSA evaluation report. Greg Billings numbers not on the tax rolls has been sent and initial payments have been received. New acreage has declined, and we're going to hear more about that, I believe, from Mike Circle in this meeting, but we did have a discussion, presentation actually, that showed vineyard, declines within the state as well as the areas. And everybody agreed that continued evaluation of crop changes, should be monitored so that we know whether we have accurate water usage information. Yes. And it's, up 38 grant projects monitoring, well cycling and easement coordination is ongoing, and staff has received an offer of a potential site for a monitoring well that would be in a very favorable area for the there's a new red line version of the bylaws, which I guess you're also going to see based on what's in the agenda. Mostly it has the GSA's new attorneys. If we do define more for ag attendance and so on, that sort of thing, which is into that sort of in the bylaws. It's not one specific. Maybe that would be one more change. There was an unsolicited grant level proposal that was received from California Consulting, and that was briefly discussed. Categories, it's not yet ready for board consideration. The consultant was asked if the consultant was asked to track grants for potential application by EMA GSA, they would want a $6,000 monthly payment for that effort. And since there's good information in the IR and the newsletters, those grant opportunities that we want to go after. And then finally, there were two additional areas of concern or interest that were raised at the committee. The CAG would like to understand better how recharge is tracked relative to historical trends. That's really good in play whenever you're in real time understand. So perhaps we can get GSI to give a future presentation on that topic. Or years. And then lastly, Kay would like to understand what long-term implications of vineyard removal and value. Kay would like to know the budget constraints, given potential reductions in production revenue due to the vineyard acreage decline. That was it.
Great, thank you. Okay, really appreciate your volunteering for that. Any questions? Are you willing to take questions? Any questions? Feedback?
Just appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for the effort. And good to hear if the virtual meetings are effective and if that's the right format to make sure we maximize attendance. Let us know.
That's what we did previously when they were developing GSC. I think fairly well, and I thought very well actually. And I would certainly recommend sticking with it.
Yeah, okay. And one output from the virtual that we discussed was to the virtual nature of the meetings allows us to use some automated tools for meeting transcripts for us if we want to refer to them. Okay.
Yeah, we talked about getting the meetings recorded. And then also there's possibility of having AI just do a summary.
Yes, yes. Keep it minimum overhead, maximum participation. Thank you very much.
One question, you mentioned that the attendance was a little low for this one, but we did appoint last year 2 new members. So I don't know if new members were there, but
Yeah, Brad was there. I'm CJ. With the other person.
So how many are we short then?
Yeah, I know, right.
Yeah,
But we're missing a tribe, right? So we
Yeah.
have 8 on record right now. Okay. So half, 50% attendance.
You know, I thought I would think that the virtual meeting would be easier to get to, but we may challenge on the first number of time. It's really at 3 o'clock. And that's probably not ideal.
Who's responsible for sending the meeting? Are you who's sending the meeting invites out? Are we getting any feedback on the declines, like time of day?
We do sometimes, but not from the members.
Okay.
But yeah, we get a declined notice,
No
no
feedback.
information
No
on why necessarily.
Okay,
Not-
unless they know us.
Who sends?
But I mean, we can hold them at the next meeting.
Yeah, that would be
Make-
on the way into the next meeting. All right, thank you. Go ahead, Mike.
Anything about comments?
Yeah.
Yeah, just maybe a suggestion for your consideration for future meetings, Pat Young, some of our county agency. In another basin where we have lengthy agendas, the CAG actually has a segment where they would talk about each agenda item. So her report would be broken up by agenda item, you would have the staff presentation, and then before you go to board questions, and then CAG input, public comment, and then back to the board. And that way, by the time you get to the bottom of the agenda, you might have forgotten what she said about one of those items. So just something to consider.
Thanks. Good,
Yeah.
good to hear. Any other public comment, feedback?
Kevin Merrill is getting.
Kevin.
Hi there, Tim Nicey, GSI Water Solutions. Since I'm going to be helping with the periodic evaluation, the discussion of these is going to be pretty important for what's going to be staffed and how big is this the transcripts going to be available?
I'm not sure if we captured, did we capture it for the first meeting for our new?
We don't have a transcript for the first meeting. Sort of the discussion that we've had at staff level is that the transcript was really sort of more intended to be a tool for the reporter from the CAG to summarize the report. No, it's not necessarily published on the website, but I mean, we can share it with you as the consultant supporting the GSA. I mean, they are public meetings, so it's not like, so, yeah, we can share it with you.
I didn't know if you'd like to understand how recharge is tracked. I think it was recharge. That's what that was.
Yes, in different situations, but drought situations. They're very nears.
That might help me in the future. That's great.
Great, thank you. Any other comments? We'll bring it back. Yes.
I guess, does the board have thoughts on the splitting up the CAG report to relevant items on the board agenda?
seemed like a reasonable suggestion.
Okay. It seems reasonable to me, because yeah, there was a lot of good information that gets provided, but yeah, that's come all at once, so. We're figuring this out as we move along, so. Okay, we'll implement that, figure out how we incorporate that into the agenda.
Everyone good to move on? Yeah, all right.
I'm sorry, we have a from CJ. He has wanted to add number.
Yes.
CJ, you can unmute. CJ, you have your hand raised. You can unmute if you have a comment.
All right. Can you hear me now? Is it working? Hello.
Yes. Can you hear us?
Yes,
TJ?
I can.
You have the floor.
Oh, all right. Unfortunately, I've been fighting for the better part of 15 minutes to get on this call. So my apologies, and I don't know if my comments will be heard. Gay Infante prepared the minutes of our CAG, and she did a wonderful job on it. So I don't have much to supplement it, other than to say that some discussion during our CAG meeting centered on the fact that, of course, the significant feature of the EMA is the fact that the Santa Ynez River bisects the entirety of the EMA. And as a surface water user, I'm highly sensitized to the possibility of the inclusion of surface water as part of the groundwater solution. Having just finished my extensive report to the Water Resources Board, which is rigorous for well owners in the reach of the river. I and those who have contacted me and encouraged me to participate want to make sure that we protect against the intrusion of trying to add surface water users to this regime that is being contemplated. It appears that that is not the case at this point, but I want to vocally do it. The other question that emerged, and the question is whether there was any duplication of effort within the EMA of information being gathered by the conservation district, and whether that represented a duplication or a doubling of burden to individual well holders that have it. So that was discussed, and the complete resolution, I'm not completely sure. So my whole point is to advocate on behalf of keeping surface water and groundwater separate, because the regimes are significant and I think do an appropriate job of that. But what about those that are duplicated within the EMA and are reporting well use? Can we presume that it is not a redundant factor? And that's the whole extent of my comments.
Okay, thank you, CJ. I believe the question with regard to river water, surface water, it's not in our hands. It's pretty clear, right? Our domain is groundwater. I believe any modification to that is at the state level. Is that, do I remember that correctly?
Yeah, I think that's a good characterization. Yeah, I mean, that there has been in the GSP made a significant distinction between surface and groundwater in the EMA, and that was really largely the intent of the action plan and notifying people about that distinction, and then the associated reporting requirements. So yeah, to date, there has been no action or direction from the board to change that, and so as staff, we are going to continue to operate with the distinction that water pumped from the above narrow salubrious area is surface water, is not subject to the groundwater extraction fee, nor would be wells within that area would be subject to the well registration requirements for the EMA GSA.
With that clarity, I don't know that we can even venture to even comment on or resolve or attempt to resolve. We probably acknowledge, but attempt to resolve whether there's overlap or stacking of fees. I think I'm paraphrasing CJ's point, but. Or even.
Yeah, I mean, that's not an agendized item for different topics, so I don't think.
But it's maybe one we could ask for that.
Ask them. Yeah, but, okay, so is there a consensus on that?
Yeah, to get more clarity, Alma, is that what
Okay,
you're,
yes.
and have staff bring that to us.
You want to suggest that as a direction for staff, everybody? Okay, I see, Brett, are you okay with that?
I don't know. I mean, I thought it was clear that the San Diego River groundwater was being managed by the conservation district since 1939. This is the new thing. They've been doing it 75 years prior to this organization. So I don't think there's necessarily inappropriate or duplication. It's more of they have the precedent here.
I have 3 nods, so it feels like it's just, for some reason, a gray area. Why don't we dig into it? Yes, okay. Dan, you got that?
So, Joan, or
Oh, my recollection is a little vague, but the water board that required us to do education kind of got up to, we're not regulating, but so I think mapping it out and knowing where the overlap is, maybe how many wells, or it just something visual to give us a sense, and then to give clarity so that riparian water users know that they're not being billed twice.
I think that's the important point, is to get clarity. So even if you think that is clear and there's serious precedent, what we're doing is new and it's introducing maybe a lot of questions.
Yeah.
So let's get it.
Yeah, maybe LAPCO's gonna have to weigh in on this from a charter standpoint.
Yeah, so one thought that we had on this, and this was, is that, in well registration process would be another good opportunity to be, we're gonna be outreaching to pumpers in the EMA. And we're gonna need to be, talking with them about how they register their wells and if they fall within the above narrows alluvium area, whether or not they need to register their wells with the GSA or not. And a lot of good materials were prepared as part of the action plan to help differentiate whether, help groundwater extractors understand where they're pumping from based on horizontal, geographic, and groundwater basin features. So, I think that's gonna sort of come naturally, and actually what we've envisioned is that, that we can have a facilitator with that outreach that can help with that. But we can definitely agendize that ahead of that if that's what the board is interested in seeing.
I think we've got consensus to do that, so I think we're making that a direction.
Okay, and so I guess there's two pieces I'm hearing. I want to make sure I'm getting it clear. There's the help delineate the surface water features so people understand, and then there's also talk about overlapping fees. Is that another piece of it that you want us to agendize, or is it just the delineation of the different classification?
Why don't we start with delineation?
Okay,
Let's make
that makes
we
sense.
clarify that, the rest might be also clear.
Okay, so we will bring back more information on help pumpers in the basin understand the delineations between surface and groundwater and other jurisdictional items in the EMA.
All right, let's move on. Any other comments? Ready to move on? Item 5, these are our actionable items, and introduce item 5A, which is review and consider approval of the professional services agreement with MLJ Environmental for the EMA GSA DMS well registration and reporting platform. To open it up for any comments done from staff and your recommendations.
Yeah, so this was an item that was on our January agenda, and then also was an item that we took to the CAG, as you heard earlier. And it's been something that we've been talking about for a good period of time now, and I'm really evaluating it in earnest here more recently. And so I'll go through the staff report, not in full detail because it largely is the same as the staff report that was presented to the board last time. However, there have been some updates. And so I want to cover some of those. But maybe before I do that, I want to just a couple of preambles. The EMA GSA, what we're really looking at here, at least from a staff's perspective, is selection of a software platform that we can utilize to collect and record well registration information, and that at some point, likely 18 months in the future, this is the platform that could be utilized to collect metered groundwater production data for the purposes of understanding how much groundwater is pumped in the EMA and administering the groundwater extraction fee. So again, we're looking to purchase a software platform. That's been the goal of this initiative, and what we feel we need to do as staff as our job. And I referenced the 18 months because those are the timelines that are established in the groundwater or the well metering and reporting ordinances that this board adopted. And then the other relevant ordinance here is the well registration ordinance that the board adopted as well. So that, and then the other thing, sort of the preamble here, is that selection of a platform is not a permanent decision. The platforms that are presented are, there's an initial setup fee, and then there's an ongoing subscription or service fee in some cases. But we're not locked in perpetuity. So there is the potential for the GSA to change the direction at some point in the future. That's what it wants to do. So just a couple of things to take into mind when we're trying to, reach, consensus as a board, at least for moving forward. And then I guess the other thing, we've spent quite a bit of time to get to this point, and so it'd be good to be able to shift and focus our efforts towards actually collecting the well registration data here soon to meet the timelines established in the adopted ordinances. So, so that being said, the staff of the GSA received 4 proposals for what we were calling data management systems. I try to hesitate to use the word data management system because it's very generic. I'm not a database programmer, but data management systems can mean a lot of things. Really what we're trying to do is get a software platform, well registration, and metered groundwater production reporting. So it's we want a platform that allows us to do those things efficiently. We received 4 proposals. I think this piece I covered last time. We've received approval from DW. Well, yeah, we've received approval from DWR that they're going to provide facilitation support services to support the implementation of this platform and the outreach and, lack of a better term, the hand holding that might be required to help people, register their wells and then learn how to report groundwater extractions. So that's going to save the EMA GSA a lot of time and money by DWR covering that level of effort. So we reviewed multiple proposals as we discussed last time. I think the highlight is we on Friday received an updated proposal from the Conservation District. And we didn't have a lot of time spent with that, but we didn't have enough time to evaluate how that updated proposal might rank relative to the criteria that we had identified for evaluating the proposals. And so the table on page 19 of your agenda packet includes sort of the updated characterization. The big changes are, in the updated proposal, the Conservation District would allow ownership, the EMA GSA ownership and direct control of data. It was our understanding the previous proposal didn't have that. The landowner registration and meter entry components are still developing. That might have changed slightly, but it really hasn't changed. So they're still under development as we understand it. The staff exporting reports would be similar to other ones with the EMA GSA would have direct control, and then platform maturity is developing. And then additionally, there's updated cost information for the Conservation District. So that is what changed. The other thing that has changed is at the back end of the staff report is we included information on pricing, database platforms, licensing structure, costs and acreage associated with the recommended platform for moving forward, which is the MLJ watermark solution. And so this was provided to help address a number of the questions that the board had when we were reviewing these proposals before. And so the recommendation in the staff report really hasn't changed. And partially we didn't have enough time to do a detailed evaluation of an updated proposal, but partially because a lot of the other sort of underlying considerations haven't changed either. Some have, but some haven't. And so we've been spending a lot of time and energy thinking about this and trying to, put forth a recommendation that, applies with the current policy direction we have from the board and allows us really most importantly to move forward with the important work that we need to do to register wells and begin getting a better sense for how much pumping is going on in the basin. And so, with all those considerations, we still believe that the MLJ platform makes the most sense for the GSA to move forward with at this point for these reasons. Really, the critical thing we need to do right now is start registering wells. And as we understand, that's a mature platform that allows us to start the well registration process, sooner than the other, not the non-mature platforms. The question of overlapping reporting is one that is still somewhat outstanding, but is also one that doesn't need to be resolved for 18 months. You know, with the adopted ordinances, nobody's going to be reporting groundwater extraction until October of 2027. So there's time to figure out that piece, but I really think personally that our focus should be on well registration and starting that work now. And so we see the MLJ platform as the quickest path to be able to begin well registration. There are changes potentially coming in the conservation district reporting that we learned about this week. Apparently there's some new legislation that says that conservation districts can or must switch from a fiscal or calendar year to a water year reporting. That may have some implications, that may change things, that may provide opportunities to be more efficient because that would align with the GSA's reporting periods. Those are things that need to play out over time. And so I don't know that they affect our decision here today. Well, I mean, they can affect it, but that's just something we had in our analysis. And so based on that, the recommendation stands to move forward with the MLJ platform that we have presented.
Thank you. Appreciate that you did that extra work for us from our last request and our last meeting questions.
Yeah, I have a couple of procedural questions. And maybe this doesn't matter, but in other contexts, when you have bids come in, it has to be fair. And if we allowed somebody to alter their bid and didn't open that up for everybody, then the people who didn't get it, I think we would be potentially open for a lawsuit. Because, I mean, I don't know how that works in this context, but as a general rule, when you solicit RFPs, the process has to be fair and you can't allow one person sort of to come in. So that's a concern I've got. And then, there's nothing against Brett, but
It's the agency standing right there.
But the recusal issue is another one that I think is one we need to be clear about. Most recusals I'm familiar with, you can't participate in the discussion, because you can influence, because you're another board member, because people look up to you. And so just not voting. So I would, again, I'm just raising procedural issues upon which I'd like our attorney to opine.
And Bill, maybe while you're working, I could jump in on the procurement piece of this. So, yeah, this has been maybe a somewhat non-traditional procurement. We don't have defined procurement policies as we don't have defined bylaws, and that's one of the things we're looking to address later on the agenda. This started out as an informal solicitation of proposals, which has been what I would consider has been a practice that the GSA has utilized in the past for a number of consultant solicitations. We originally solicited one proposal. We learned that there are other offerings out there. And so then that's why we solicited additional proposals. And then we received the conservation district's proposal. And that's sort of how we got to where we are today. The original ranking of this, we identified some very key things that staff thought that the conservation district original proposal didn't align with what staff was trying to solicit. They submitted an updated proposal. So that's just kind of how we got to where we are today. In terms of procedurally, whether that falls, I'll let Phil speak to that.
Let's hear from Phil. Phil, can you unmute?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So, there's two avenues that are going on in this question. One is a legal avenue, and then the other is truly a policy avenue of what the board wants to do. From the legal perspective, there is no requirement in an RFP process that you can't change and allow people to change their RFP during the process, allow them to come in late. None of that is illegal. if this was a public works contract, which is an offer type contract that is put out on, it is the lowest responsible bid, and there's a time frame, and those are specifically set up so that you're getting somebody's bid and it's locked in. That's a public works contract. This isn't. When you get outside of that, it's really whatever the board would like to set up as policy. RFPs, RFQs, there's no legal limitation for you to take one late, to allow people to change. It's only in the public works bid process do you run into that and rules for that legally. Whether the board wants to set a policy is completely side issue. And I'm sorry that I've got noise outside my door here. The next question that I heard is on the recusal. This is not a recusal because a board member has a financial interest in the contract or that it's a contract with them. If it was that type of recusal, then yes, the board member can't be a part of the discussion, and in some instances cannot involve themselves at all. Like, you cannot contract with yourself. That's a 1090 violation. But that's not what we have here. We have a board member who is part of an agency, and because he's part of that agency, he's on this JPA. This JPA is a grouping of public agencies. So there is no legal conflict for him to have a discussion about this item. And frankly, if it wasn't for our JPA, he could vote on the item. But our JPA limits the voting. But there is no legal limitation on his involvement or his communications related to the item. Policy matter, before I was here, the JPA was formed and said we don't want to vote, but I believe it also says we have to have a unanimous vote of everybody else. So that's the policy choice that's been taken. Does that answer the questions?
Thank you. Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm clear. Phil, so usually we default to not so much the legality, but also the, sort of the public interpretation. And so in to be ultra conservative and to ensure that there's no perception of conflict of interest, we usually default to recusals so that it's not a personal financial bias, but an entity financial benefit.
Well, that gets back to the question, is an entity really financially benefiting by being in an authority, which is a joint exercise of that agency's powers? Like, every agency member of this JPA is jointly exercising their powers. So is that agency benefiting, or is it just using its powers and being helpful to the overall arching goals? That's really a policy question. And that's why I'm being clear that it's not a legal question. It's a policy question of how the board would like to address a situation where one of its agencies potentially could be helpful to the overarching goal more than others are by providing an additional service that others aren't.
Under a financial contract.
But it is an award as opposed to, can we make a contribution in the spirit of a startup? I think those are two different things. I'll defer to the board because we have an opinion or some feedback on this. It sounds like it's up to us.
As a general rule, I think perception of conflict is as important as a conflict, and to make it cleaner. But I mean, that's how I would go about it.
So I said something that I'm thinking through real time. So there's a difference between awarding a contract, which assumes it's more than covering costs. Then what we've done is all of our agencies contributing resourcing to the startup of the GSA is, we've loaned money, we offered staff, we've done things gratis at our costs, not in an award of a contract with recurring revenue to me, those are different things. And so I would lean for recusal on the point, just because what we're doing is awarding an RFP. And we need our vendors and our potential vendors to know that when they propose something, they will be given equitable consideration.
Yeah, I think it might be kind of hard for someone replying to a RPF and they're competing against one of the board agencies. Seems like, and right there, that gives the smell test, like you were saying, Joe, perception.
I think we go down the path of choosing a policy and voting on that, and we can ask you to recuse and.
Right. I guess the voters that elected me to the water district probably want me to speak my mind representing them. And what you're asking me to do is to not vote. But you're saying that I can vote for my thoughts for the board. So it just sets a kind of a precedent then as far as policy of this board that that's what's preferred going forward. And again, I'm running the risk of maybe not satisfying my constituents when you put that constraint on. So I'd like to hear what Doug has to think about it.
Well, it seems confusing because our lawyer's telling us one thing and we're talking about a different solution. So, we had policy around this. So I'm not completely comfortable either way. You don't have clear direction from the board.
Yeah. I mean, I think the legality is kind of the floor. And do we want to be more stringent, more? Again, I'm thinking of it from the perspective of other bidders. I mean, what's fair?
I mean, I can see that point too. But yes, in fairness, we should have thought this through before we went out to propose it, but it's conflicted.
All right.
Well, to be fair, I think, Dan, we got an unsolicited response, is that right?
It was an unsolicited.
We couldn't have anticipated this particular position.
Do we want to go back to the other vendors and say, okay, you got a chance to update your bid now? Are we going down a path that we don't want to go from a policy standpoint by doing that? The concern is lack of fairness. That would address it.
I think that, no, I think we solved on whether we have given everyone a equitable response opportunity. What
Okay,
we're
so
trying to determine is who should vote and if there's an inherent or implied conflict.
I
right,
think
but there was
vote
also
is
one
clear.
other issue. That
Right
was
to
the
not
lack
do
of deliberation
that.
that the staff did with the.
Yeah. So the question is, can he be part of the discussion? That's.
Right.
That's.
Thank you for pointing out.
And the other point I was trying to make is that they need a chance to deliberate, I guess, further on the unsolicited proposal. It sounded like they were rushed to get to this meeting and they didn't have adequate time to review that to see if it satisfied the constraints that we brought out last week.
I didn't interpret it that way. I interpreted that the rush was because they just got another update this week, so they're by the lack of response of the supplier, they didn't have enough time to evaluate the changes thoroughly. But we've been more than fair, accepting an unsolicited response and iterations on that response. But I don't think it's fair to say they didn't have enough time as a consequence.
But that's what Dan was saying, because of the timing of the receipt of the second.
We got the proposal on Friday. We had to publish an agenda packet on Monday. We've had since Monday to think about this and taken a lot of my off hours, putting a lot of time and energy to this. And so I would say, I mean, I've had time to process it now. And I mean, that was the basis of the recommendation.
Fair to say the changes didn't change your recommendation?
It didn't change the recommendation. It did address some of the other concerns, but at the end of the day, it wasn't enough to move the needle on.
But we've identified that you can discuss on the topic, but not vote. We can just
Legal, yeah.
discuss the topic and
Let's concur.
For discussion, I have no problem there. But, you know, like say, staff didn't change their recommendation. I don't see anything in worst case. Just throw out the update and go with what everyone originally said.
We've moved into discussion, so make sure everyone agree that we're okay to discuss.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Everything's okay?
I think in future we should have policies
I
that,
do too. I'm concerned that, I agree. Maybe we put that as a topic
yeah,
for follow-up, but I think
yeah, I'm
we're
willing.
highly motivated because we just scheduled an off-cycle meeting to get a decision, to get a decision. Agreement on that, so we make that a priority, but we'll address that at another meeting. Okay.
Well, I would just add, the bylaws have policies. So,
Well, hope we'll get to that.
Yeah, we're better, yeah, in light of experience.
Okay. Okay, so I think where we are is we've got consensus. We'll open it up for discussion on the topic 5A. So questions, comments? Anything on the proposals? And the new data that we have?
I think staff did a good job. They analyzed it. They did a good job on it. I'm gonna more on that.
I guess I have a question on, the second year and ongoing cost. Where is that money coming from out of the budget?
yeah, so if you'll recall, and I'm sorry, I don't have it for you, like the budget we approved in your packet, but, so there's $50,000 included in the budget for groundwater extraction fee administration. And so our thought is that 15,000 of that could go towards the platform licensing fee, as that will be the primary mechanism in the future for where we would be getting groundwater extraction data and utilizing it for administering or utilizing the groundwater extraction for the purposes of establishing the groundwater extraction fees.
And the first year will be paid for by the grant.
Yes.
And so the second year of the ongoing will not affect the extraction fee because it's going to be from that line item.
The second year of the ongoing would come out of, budgeted funds that would be funded by the groundwater extraction.
Questions, comments, anything else? I just want to clarify, first of all, Dan, thanks for getting so much more detail on, the proposals that we were considering. And just in the context of your recommendations and the desire to get to a software platform, I do want to clarify what looks like maybe some concession, I'm going to use that word. Did we get some concession from MLJ with their tiered pricing? So am I reading it correctly that we can go up to 60,000 active acres and no price will change for us?
Correct, yeah, so their pricing model, as I understand it, has a sort of minimum active acreage threshold. You're below that, $15,000 flat fee. If you go above the 60,000, it's 25 cents per acre per year. Additional fee on top of the 15,000. We're currently sitting at 39,000 active acres, so that gives us, a 20,000 active acres of headroom.
50%.
Yeah, it's pretty
50%. We're close to that. And so then I wanted to make sure that we understood even two questions. They're basically related. They have to do with, it looked like they were committing to fix our maintenance fees or ongoing annual fees at 15,000 for 4 solid years. But what happens in year 5 and year 5 after that? Both if we stay below 60,000 if we go above it. What's our exposure? I call it the out years.
I guess if any year, the way I read it, there's any year, we three are cancel and move on.
We can cancel.
Yeah.
But And absolutely, but if we were to maintain the contract, I read that they are fixing our fees for 4 years.
Right, because they gave us a fee, not we're going to make it 5, we still have the option.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so my recollection, and Nate, feel free to jump in here, was that they would agree to fix the fee for 4 years if we locked into a 4-year contract. I think if our recommendation was not necessarily to lock into the 4-year contract, but to do a single year. So there could be some variability in that fee and even the second year,
but our fee wouldn't go down, so why wouldn't we lock in? Our fee won't go down because we will never, unless we hit.
yeah, and if that's what the direction of the board would like to do, we're glad to take that.
Seems to me investing an awful lot for just a year.
Yeah.
You might want.
Exactly.
Stable.
We're spending at least 18,000 for the implementation costs and the training. So why we wouldn't enter into the 4-year agreement? I guess what I'm really asking is what's the downside? You can still turn it to proceed, turn it for college or.
So
Yeah, I think they're,
Okay,
those
that's
are good points.
everyone's been. Any other questions? Okay, I'll open it up for public comment. Anybody in the room? Go ahead.
Couple things. Yeah, could I ask approximately how many hours, staff hours, you would try put into this process? RFP?
Yeah, I don't have a solid estimate around that. We did do one analysis of, Q2, fiscal year Q2, October through December, and we spent $5,000 specific to this task. That doesn't count the time that we would have put in this quarter, preparing for the January and the CAG in this meeting. And then there was some time in advance of that when we were soliciting and vetting proposals as well. So, I mean, it's not an insignificant amount of time or money that has been.
I would suggest if the board considers accepting the conservation district's proposal, that it does open up certainly a challenge. It may not be a legal issue, but as pointed out, the other bidder, particularly MLJ or whatever, is going to say, well, there did for other people. And I'm not saying there's any truth to it. But what I would recommend, rather than wording it to anybody at this point, if that's an issue, is to rebid it and eliminate any controversy. But again, you're looking at a considerable amount of staff time, over $5,000 staff time. So I just want to point that out. The other thing I wanted to point out is the staff, I've not been involved in this at all. Just heard kind of about the potential controversy in the last few days. But staff are your subject matter experts. Staff, county staff, everybody, every agency has an representative, have people, we're all the CAG, and this was discussed. They all came to the same conclusion that they recommended. I strongly urge the board to listen to your staff.
Thank you, Randy. Any other public comment in the room? I see none. Any online?
If anyone online has a comment, please raise your hand. I don't see any hands raised online.
Yeah, I'll bring it back. I genuinely, I'm gonna go back to Phil. If we have Brett recuse, do we do that before we bring it back or when we have a motion to vote?
I think technically when we have a motion.
Okay,
Yeah.
so let's bring it back to the board. Go ahead.
So, one question that I talked to Dan today on was we didn't get an answer to was we asked whether the fact that the other two, Central Management District and the Western Management District, will be done by the Conservation District. What, if there is any cost or conflict, is merging those in order to get our unified contract together. He didn't have an answer today. I raised that question at the last meeting. I don't know whether, I guess, is it Stetson that pulls that together? He would be answer man on that.
Yeah, we asked that of Stetson and we got some good information. I don't know that it specifically addressed your answer. It was more, well, it was more about the reporting with Zone-E and how that would work. I mean, in terms of cost to extract the data, I mean, the way I understand it, and maybe Tim can help me, is the way we prepare annual reports, which is the primary source where we're actually combining data from multiple management areas, is the EMA's hydrogeologist prepares the EMA sub-report based off EMA data and then shares that sub-report to the CMA and WMA consultant currently Stetson, who then also combines those three reports into a single report. And so, as I understand it, there would be an additional cost associated with that current procedure, because all of the EMA data would go to Tim would put in his report, he would give that to Stetson, and then that would go in the joint report. Now, maybe there'd be other ways to do it in the future, but based on the way we're doing it now, I don't know that there's additional costs. Tim, if you have any costs.
Okay, other questions, comments? Anybody want to make a motion? Yes.
I move staff recommendation and add recommendation.
Okay,
Second.
we have a first and a second motion on the table. I think that means we have to.
I have to abstain.
Okay, so then you want to help us sort of vote?
You want roll call or? Okay. Director Circle,
Yes.
Director Hartman,
Yes.
Director Jones,
Yes.
Chair Arona.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
And I think we have, just to summarize, a direction to work on policy if we don't do it later tonight. Okay. Okay, moving on. Item 5B, review and consider approval of the EMA GSA Bylaws. So then, in our pockets. Dan, do you have a staff report on that one?
We don't have a staff report on that one. I was going to let Bill take the lead on the bylaws item, as he's been very instrumental in helping us put those together.
Thank you. So what you have before you is now the latest version of the bylaws. Most of the provisions in the bylaws are really purely policy matters. There are a couple legal matters in there. We can't overstep the JPA. JPA will always rule. One issue that I wanted to get out, because I've seen some questions on it. When you form a JPA, you pick one of your agencies to follow their procedures legally. Now, what those mean legal procedures is very limited. I'm going to give you the case that started this. There was a JPA at one point in time that wanted to condemn some property. It condemned some property, but two of its member agencies had two slightly different processes for how you would condemn it. They followed one of the agencies. The person whose property was condemned said, you didn't do it right. You needed to follow both agencies' processes because that's the way the JPA is formed. After that case, they adopted a statute which says you can pick one. So you pick whichever agency you want in your group, and then you have to follow those legal qualifications. So for this JPA, we have picked the Santa Barbara County Water Agency. Accordingly, if you're going to be doing a public contract code work, building infrastructure, we have to follow the public contract code as set forth for the Santa Barbara County Water Agency. That could be slightly different than it is, for example, a CSD. When you get to the purchase policy, that's our limitation. Aside from that, you can set other policies if you would like. So, public contract code, we have to follow the Santa Barbara County Water Agency. Santa Barbara County Water Agency has some legal requirements for purchasing, but we don't have to follow those. Those set a floor. If you wanted to set something differently, you can. Aside from that, I'm not really sure if there's anything more to go into in these. You know, we've talked about them at the last meeting. The CAG is set up to be as inclusive as possible. If there's any particular sections of the bylaws you'd like to discuss or ask questions, I'm here.
Thank you, Bill. Go ahead.
I think in light of our previous discussion, what section of the bylaws should we be looking at? Or is it adding something
Do you for the CAG or for the agency in general?
for the agent, or on the recusal issue?
So
Phil, do you know the answer to that? Because so we don't have to pour through these 19
yeah,
pages.
the answer is it's not in the bylaws right now. The JPA currently says what the voting can occur if a member agency is giving a proposal. There is no recusal provision. And I want to be clear, frankly, I'm not even sure that you legally could set up a situation where you did not allow a board member whose agency was wanting to do something for the JPA to not be able to speak. You can stop them from voting, which we have, but you couldn't really stop them from speaking. To give the example, somebody was talking about typically how you see recusal. Recusal happens either because it's a 1090 contract and then you can't even be involved in them. That's a contract with yourself from the agency. The other is a financial interest. If I have a financial interest. So to give an example of how this would work, somebody wants to do land use by my house. It fits within an area that's close enough that I would have a financial impact by that land use change. So I could not then advise the board on that land use change because I would have a financial interest. But that just means I can't advise the board. As a member of the public, I'm completely allowed to say, hey, this is affecting me X, Y, and Z manner. So you can't limit the agency. More also to the point, you'd only be limiting the board member. You couldn't stop the general manager from the agency to come in and say anything that they wanted. So, you know, it is not a legally enforceable recusal in this instance. The voting you could. It's more, do you all agree to move forward in that manner? And that's pure policy. Is that making sense?
Not really, but I think you're advising us against it.
It helped me think through it. Because it's a subtle difference. I mean, we're a collection of agencies, a collection of entities as an agency. So it makes sense that every board member needs to be able to apply and speak. And then the delineation is on the vote. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, there is a material action for the vote. They would be avoiding the contract. So yeah, I think the abstaining in that case is the right thing to do, but I think I still have a duty to represent my constituents and provide feedback on this process.
I think the struggle that I have, and I may be alone, which is fine. I'm not familiar with the Santa Barbara Water Agency's policies. So for me if that's our bar, I feel pretty blind on what those policies are. But again, perhaps thinking of that.
And I'm sorry if I'm not being clear here. The limitations of the Santa Barbara County Water Agency's policies are very limited. If you wanted to condemn a piece of property tomorrow, I would need to go see what notice provisions they follow. If you wanted to build infrastructure, I would see what are the exact public contract code sections they follow for that and follow those, which could be different than one of the other agencies in this JPA. So it's very limited in that regard. Now, we've got some purchasing.
But it leaves a few questions, it leaves a lot of questions, but I'll just give you two examples which were redlined out of this version of the bylaws. Section 15.3 and 15.4 were redlined to define, thresholds for how we would handle procurement, dollar thresholds for what procedures we would use procurement of items. And so with those struck and simply deferring to the Santa Barbara County Water Agency, I don't know what our policies are.
I appreciate that. And I want to be, let's just address that one straight away. So for the public contract code stuff, public contract code, your building infrastructure, there will be notice, bid provisions, all of those. Those are subjects to statutes of California law. Okay. And we will follow those. The procurement process, you really need to decide what you want to do for purchasing things like desks. That's a policy you completely have, and you can change it however you want. This what the changes that were made in this were not made to say you had to follow some procedure that they're using. It was made to say you have limitations, you have a floor. Aside from that, whatever staff authority you would like to give staff for purchasing supplies, equipment, and services, you're pretty open to do. I can tell you that you are most likely not going to want to follow the purchasing requirements set forth for the Santa Barbara County Water Agency, because its purchasing agent's going to have, I believe, $200,000 worth of authority. That's what typical county purchasing agents have. But you can set the limit wherever you want. The real issue was we can't be establishing we're going to set we shouldn't do it in the bylaws also, because laws change. You don't want to set public works projects of this are going to go through this process. That is subject to Public Contract Code 2001-50. Purchasing of supplies and equipment, you can set however you would like.
Okay, but I mean, we can move on from this, but Phil, we had it written in section 15.3 and 15.4, but you redlined it, so you took it away.
Well,
I don't know what the policy is. We had it. So if we had that policy, what was the logic to remove it?
I want to be clear. I did not redline that. What I was saying is you have these limitations. If those are the policy limits that you would like, we can put them right back in. The question was, we started getting into this is, and talking with Charlotte, because I got this right before we had a CAG meeting, there were some conversation where, in particular, the public contract section, where it's listing specific dollar figures. Those aren't even the dollar figures applicable in the public contract section. For example, you might very well want to adopt the Uniform Act. And if you adopt the Uniform Act, it allows you to sidestep some of this and use a different section for smaller projects. That is, projects under $175,000 that you want to bid. But if these are the values that you would like, we absolutely can adopt those values. So let me try to give it another example. Let's say there is a provision that says, and certain procurements, because you have something here that covers a lot of procurement, certain procurements that the Santa Barbara does that have to have a notice sent out before you can purchase them. We would need to do that notice. But aside from that, if you want to give Dan the ability to spend $2,000 without board approval on desks, and then you're absolutely able to do that.
So I think what he said is
So
someone else removed this, someone else.
How did we get the red line version? Who modified the document?
But
If it wasn't right.
I have the same question on 7.2, the agenda, the process for agendas. So we sent this out to our lawyer to review, and it came out and we approved it. And then it's been redlined to a more strict process on agendas. And I think with the transparency required of the GSA, the original one allows, for any board member to bring an agenda item up, and I don't understand why we would have a more restricted process. And I don't know who added that, but it was after the comment, the initial comment period.
So Dan, how did The red line document.
So we redlined the document, based on suggested changes that we received. You know, we had direction to go to the CAG and get input as well as, you know, and so through the CAG, we listened to it, we got suggestions. These were suggested changes that were recommended. The reason that they're showing the red lines is because they're suggested changes. So if the board doesn't like them, the board can clearly see what it said before and what suggested changes were, and direct staff and legal counsel to reject or accept those changes in their consideration of adopting the bylaws.
Okay, so we made first pass, staff made first pass, did legal review the red lines then? Okay,
Yeah, so I would be ready to make a proposal to accept them with 7.2 going back to its original language on agenda of items, and I think we should add back in 15.
I'll second it.
yeah, there's they can make a motion, but that's the public comment. I would like to read these again, given the information. Comments? Questions?
Just read through the stuff again.
So I read 7.2. I'm just gonna comment back. We'll open it up for public comment. I did read 7.2 and I thought it was fair. My reaction to it was because typically the agenda development is done in public for future meetings and then it comes back from staff. I think what we want to avoid is that agenda topics get created or set outside of public exposure. That's that. So I was fine with the red lines on 7.2.
I don't agree. I think the 7.2 added language is more restrictive than the original ones that our lawyers have approved.
This one to me gives more, it's specifically written to drive consensus rather than clandestine agenda topics arriving without a common understanding of what was driving. Questions?
So, yeah, I'm just looking at this last paragraph. It says, any director wishing to place an item on a board shall submit a request to the executive director at least 1 week prior to the meeting. So you want that reinstated, right? Okay.
Yeah, I'm okay with the changes because I think that that puts staff answering each entity as if you're each board member as opposed to us as an entity, which is why we have this meeting in the public and why we build consensus together. I don't think we want things done or even perceived to be done, you know, around outside of that process. Would there be a scenario or a reason to bring something onto an agenda that we hadn't prioritized for staff to get?
It has come up before. And it was prevented.
It was prevented in public or prevented because we had consensus not to make it?
Because if we didn't have a bylaw defining.
Yeah. So the method would be to bring it forward to the board and drive consensus. And even sometimes it's partial consensus, but to do it publicly so that we are surprised by agenda topics that we didn't anticipate or expect.
I'm persuaded by your reasoning for this reason. It does require staff time and to prepare an agenda item, it can be several hours. And I think that really should come from, a majority of the board. I think that individuals shouldn't be driving staff workload. It should be a consensus. So I appreciate what you're saying.
I just want to get time for the other, because these could be detailed red lines for any of the other topics, the 15, section 15 items. Sorry, the motion was to put 15.3 back in. Is that what you're doing? Okay. You just want to take a minute to read that if you don't mind. 15.3 only. So,
That's correct.
now I need to get on that. Okay, we're ready to open it up. Any other comments? Open it up for public comment?
Sure.
Okay, public comment, go ahead. Nick.
Yeah, just wanted to make a clarification, and I think that the attorney said this, but the choice of the Santa Barbara County Water Agency as the choice of laws, that was done in the GAPA process. Then you're not being asked to make that choice right now. It's in the GAPA, and that's just being reflected here. So I can't tell you all of the details of Santa Barbara County Water Agency. We actually inherited from the county, we're a dependent special district, so it's actually the counties. But the point is, you're not being asked to choose a big water agency, you already did. For the JPA.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Other public comment?
You might want to consider about the board items because hopefully we'll be going to the quarterly meeting. So you won't need this every month. If something comes up in the quarter, such as a drought, fire, flood, you have to get another 3 months after that, do some back. It's just, a little more flexibility than that.
Thank you. Peter?
Just real quickly, Peter, CI 81, and I figure I should hopefully take accountability. Richard was the revisions to 7.2 were kind of my fault, if you will. So I just want to provide an explanation. It's not income apparatus, deciding with staff made a proposed change, and really the rationale was to have a streamlined process where I guess it encourages the staff to work with the current chair in talking about agenda items, but the previous language set up a procedure whereby, I think we've already discussed it, any board member in between meetings could contact the executive director, pose an agenda without really, either we're talking with another board member, hopefully not more than, 2 board members, but in any event, they could just have these flying agenda items coming into the executive director. Then the procedure, and I'm just trying to remember this off the top, was that the executive director would be put in a position to determine if he or they or she had time to work up the item to put on the agenda or bring forth to the meeting. And then a certain amount of discretion would be vested with the executive director to say yay or nay. But in the event that that executive director felt pressure or otherwise obligated, to do a great job and started stacking the agenda with a bunch of items and say one or more of those items happen to be sort of labor intensive, I can prepare a staff report, et cetera, then the procedure had the default of those matters going on the agenda. So staff would have to be prepared and put sometimes legal time into it, staff time into it, staff report, who knows what level or number detail of effort. Then it would come to the board, and at the beginning of every meeting, then there would be a vote as to whether or not those items would be heard. And so in the event that then you had a majority of votes saying, no, we're not going to hear that item, it would be, tremendous investment of time, effort, and money by staff and maybe legal, only to then have that matter not heard. And so it was just an observation that it could lead to an inefficient, a non-transparent and an expensive process. Whereas the alternative, if, as we've had for the last several years, at the end of every meeting, there's a standing agenda item that just says reports and proposed agenda items for the next meeting. Then in open in public, any director could make a suggestion and then there could be some discussion. And then maybe to Supervisor Harden's second point, aside from the cost, is that then there would be sort of a consensus approach based on simple majority as to whether or not that matter would be worthy of investing staff time and putting it on the next agenda. So I just wanted to, be straightforward in my rationale.
Right, thanks for that explanation. And I think, I still think in the spirit of transparency of the GSA, anyone should be able to put an item on the agenda, and whether it gets voted down, it still isn't, it still has process. And so, and then I think, the point that hopefully we get to
Hold that
quarterly
thought, because
meetings.
we're still on public comment. I just want to make sure everybody gets their opportunity. I'll bring it back. Any other public comment? None in the room, any online? Charlotte?
Anyone online, raise your hand if you want to comment. No hands raised.
Thank you. But now I can close public comment. We can bring it back and we can have your response.
Yeah, so same response, just that, I think it's more restrictive, and that if we do go to quarterly meetings, which I think we all hope that will happen someday, that if there are things that come up, they could be heard, can be discussed as to whether it's important enough to be an agenda. I just think it's more restrictive, and it's different than what our legal counsel opined on.
I was gonna make the same point Peter made, which is we don't, the power of the last two items on the agenda, it shouldn't be underscored. We have to use that. That's the methodology that we should use to raise topics or hot topics or really relevant things that have to do with it. That's we do run the risk of having runaway agendas if we don't build consensus and in an organized way for staff.
Yeah, I recognize the point you're making. I think we do use the end of the meeting for that purpose on a regular basis. I just think that the original language was less restrictive and was approved at what was at least approved by our council at one point, and then it got changed. And the same question you asked was who redlined it and why. And so I'm sticking with. I'm ready to approve the minutes with two changes.
Yeah, there's a motion and a second on the floor. We did wish to amend it in any way? Okay.
Put staff's input on that, because staff's got to do all the work. Be able to respond now quick, but it makes it efficient for them.
I'm not gonna like this answer, but I'm open to either. The reality is I work in other basins where any director can add an item to the agenda. Hasn't been an issue. I drafted the original language as what I thought was sort of a compromise that was, anybody can add it, but then the board obviously has the discretion whether or not to take the item, or to hear the item. It does potentially put additional burden on staff. Then again, I think it's originally drafted, the director has the discretion to say, no, we don't have enough time to take that item. I think the director also has, the executive director also has the discretion to say, well, that's an item to put on, but we're not going to invest lots of time and money preparing for that item.
I wonder if a compromise might be that a board member in consultation with the chair can determine whether to request or not. It's a little more check.
If I may, I was about to say something along those lines. Typically, what I see as a compromise is if two board members ask the general manager to put an item on, then it's put on. Because you've already got a motion and a second for the item to go on. And whether or not that occurs, sitting in a board meeting or outside, it's not a Brown Act violation because it's less than a quorum. And you have two board members that are wanting to put something on the agenda. So a compromise between these could be that.
So I think procedurally, we have to vote on on the first and the second motion on the table. Unless you withdraw, I think procedurally you can amend, so pause.
I think I'll modify that
Okay.
to include. To include two. Yeah, that's good.
And I would argue that it is, the chair is responsible for managing the meeting and the agenda. So I think it should be the chair who,
Helps moderate.
yeah, it should be, if I want to put something on the agenda, I should go to the chair and together we would agree, because she's got to figure out, along with the director, do we get this meeting done? How long is it? How do I manage it? So that would be my strong
Or
suggestion.
even consult to bring it up. We can't get to it, but
No,
to make sure
I
that,
guess the following meeting, that's Thursday.
okay. So I think we have to second your amendment. Is that right?
I did.
Okay.
And that's with the modification to the chair and the board. That's right.
And including 15.3, correct? Okay, so Dan, but everyone understands the motion?
Yeah, but I just one other question. How do we amend the bylaws if we go through and find we've got problems?
We can do that too.
To the board and we,
Yeah.
Put it on the agenda and
yeah.
Yeah, so if we
Dan,
find out-
we don't have a resolution today for these bylaws to be formally adopted as your final bylaws. We're getting today approval of this is what we want. We will come back with a resolution at the next board meeting that puts these in a nice format so that we see it as an attachment with hopefully no more changes. And that would be your adopted bylaws. Now, moving forward, it's a resolution. You can change anything in these policies pretty much whenever you want, as long as they're not, affecting the JPA or California law.
Okay, but to clarify, we have to drive that change. Staff doesn't go and make another update. We're surprised at the next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, everybody clear?
I'd like some clarification. What is the motion specific to the red lines that are included?
Motion is to accept the bylaws and change to 7.2, allowing any, board member and the acting chair to have an agenda item.
Okay.
in consultation with the chair.
And to include 15.3.
And
Well, but 15.3 through 15. Or straight out.
Well, to include the original language of 15.3, that's how I interpreted his point. Is that
that's correct.
what you meant? Okay.
Yes.
So to unredline 15.3 and put that section back into the document,
And 15.4.
just 15.3.
I think
Vote again.
it's a wrong kind of a gap if you include 15.3, but not the original 15.4.
Right.
Because it just says what you do from 3 to 5, 50,000, but not what you do above 50,000. So
Yeah.
I would recommend
So
we include.
15.3 and 15.4
15.3 and 15.
in the original form.
If I may, you should also put back in the sentence in 15, the intro, because that's been changed down into 15.2. And that is just the one that says we will follow the purchasing policy procedures of law that are subject to the Santa Barbara County Water Agency.
Maybe it's
We're-
easiest. Just say, reject all changes to Article 15 except 15.1.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, 15.1 stays alone and the rest of them would get removed. Go back to their original.
Okay, I want to make sure everybody's in alignment on what we're voting on. So section 7.2, in consultation, any board member can make an adjustment to the agenda in consultation with chair and executive director. Also default back to 15, section 15 with the red line changes in 15.1.
Not to do that. Leave.
We are taking the changes in 15.1, everything else
Right,
is unchanged. Okay?
Yeah.
Everybody? Okay, I think you good, Dan, to take a vote, you got that? Okay.
Yeah, well, and we're not adopting a resolution. I mean, I guess we can take a vote. Yeah, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, no, I should,
This will be a formality final draft.
yes, the final draft. All right, I apologize, but I think we need a little bit more clarification on 5A. Just specifically on, there was some discussion around, we want to lock things for 4 years at the 15,000, or do we want to just pay the initial upfront? And then there's some risk that pricing could go up in such ways.
So if we can terminate, I don't know why we wouldn't sign up for full.
If we can terminate it at any
I'm
time.
with you. I am, but I think the motion was to go with staff recommendations, and Dan, you had verbally said
It was,
the recommendation was for 1 year.
does it say that or was it silent on that?
Yeah,
Silent on
I
that.
mean, I think it was a little ambiguous, there was a recommendation to go with the MLJ platform, and I don't know that it was specific to the duration of the contract services. Now, the contract. But the contract that's included in the agenda packet, said for a term not to exceed 1 year. So that's where I was recalling that it was sort of, at least that's structured in the agenda packet, was just 1 year with services. So the board would like more than that. But I don't know.
Fine print, but John, what was your intention? I think you had the motion, the initial motion.
Oh, for the longer duration.
Okay, did anyone not understand that? Do we need to revote? Or do we need to clarify?
Well, and we reached out for clarification that to get the 4 year pricing, you need to commit to 4 years.
Yeah. Okay, so
We need to revote because it's a
I
big
think
deal.
I do too. Okay, so do you want to make your motion on that?
So I move that we go with staff recommendation on MLJ and that we have a 4-year period.
And change to a 4 year agreement.
Second.
All in favor?
Uh,
Any opposed? Okay.
Abstention.
Yes.
All right, thank you for that. Okay, so we okay to move to 5C.
Yes.
All right. Review and consider approval of resolution 2026-01 adopting the conflict of interest code for the EMA GSA.
So Dan, you want me to take that one too?
Yep, that's all you.
Okay. This is really just a formality at this point. We are adopting the resolution which adopts the conflict of interest code that the board has reviewed before and seen and agreed with. This resolution kicks off the process of it going to our reviewing body, which is the Santa Barbara County, who will then tell us our conflict of interest code does everything it needs. We will get notification back from them and the code will be in place.
Do we need a motion? Yeah. Any discussion questions?
I've got a question. Page 59. We talk about staff. Does like Charlotte have to do a 700? You know, what is the staff that's got to do it, and consultants? That's, I don't.
I did have to do a Form 700 last year anyway.
So any staff,
Let's.
Here, I can try to answer that for you. So the test they tell you is one step away from making a decision. If you're one step away from making a decision and it could potentially affect some finance of yours, you have to file Form 700. Now, there's two things with that. First, one step away is actually two steps away, because I would say that your general manager, your executive director is one step away from making the decision. The board makes the decision. But if Charlotte, for example, advises Dan, we need new desks, and Dan tells you guys, we want to purchase desks, Charlotte needs to be filing a Form 700 because she, in that instance, is considered one step away. That's why she's on here is a full disclosure category. There sections of the disclosure category affect different things. Like it's all based on what the person's job descriptions are, and what type of financial impacts they could have. So for me as an attorney, it could be lands, it could be financial, it could be everything. So I have to file a full Form 700. If you had somebody who was only an office manager and would therefore never have any input into real estate purchases of the agency, they would file under a different category than one. But it seems like everybody had decided, as I came in, that ones was the category for everybody. It seems right for an agency like this that's so smallly staffed, but unfortunately, that means we have to file 700s for all of us.
So then all of Dan's staff has to do 700 because they can have impact, whatever he assigns them to research and get back to it.
Dan's staff is, well, you'd have to get more into detail who we're discussing about on Dan's staff. And some of that is very going to be fact specific. But if you have a secretary treasurer who's listed on here, they need to file. Alternate directors, those are Form 700 mandatory filers. General counsel, because I will advise on everything. But to give you an example, I would say that Nate should be filing a Form 700. Nate fits under the concept that he is a consultant, he's a contractor position, and he is advising, right now we are working on, for example, easements. So he should be filing a Form 700 related to any real estate property that he has.
Okay, then the consultants like Tim Nicely, he's here. He does consultant work for us. So he have to do it.
What consulting work is he doing precisely?
Analysis.
Yeah, all of our analysis for groundwater.
Yeah, I mean, he should file a Form 700. You'll see we have to do a very specific, and I know this kind of is a pain, but this is what conflict of interest codes require, is they require that we look at those positions and what their advice is to the board and make them file forms so the public can understand if there is a potential conflict there. Consultants are really the difficult one. But, I'll be filing a Form 700 because I'm advising the board. Dan will have to file one. I would say Charlotte should file one. Nate should be filing one.
There's language in here that says the board can determine for consultants or particular new positions, whether or not their scope of work would warrant a disclosure.
Yeah.
But that also seems like an excessive amount of attention and work on who's doing what.
And so I'll tell you this, that language right there that you're looking at, that's been kind of standard conflict of interest code language for 20 years that came from the FPPC. I realize this stuff gets complicated. And especially when you start getting into consultants, like what are they consulting on? What can they be affecting? But
right. I mean, I think Brian, you just mentioned, what about the CAG? I think the answer has to be no, based on how structured our organization. But then, if you want to go down that path, then you could argue the public influences our process and let's make it public informs. I mean, it's just ridiculous if you keep going down this road.
You got to trigger it to they're getting paid by the agency. Or if you do the CAG, like one of the things we've done with the CAG is we've removed it from being a Form 700 because we haven't made it an official position. So to give you another example, I have a GSA where we have something like the CAG. We call it the Policy Advisory Committee. That's an official position. We set it up like it was a planning commission. They have to file Form 700s. And, you know, some people thought that was a good policy choice. Others didn't. That's where they landed. But if you are receiving income, whether it be a contract income or staff income from the agency, these kind of draconian, overly bearing rules of filing Form 700s kick in.
Other questions, comments? Out for public comment. Open for public comment.
I have to follow up for other agencies. But no,
Is it simple, Tim, where you get to duplicate your roles inside the system process? So it's not, you don't have to fill out the form 6 times. You can actually identify your roles in the policies, and so your single filing gets to apply.
yeah, it's a role for listing just for the agency.
Are you in the online system that we are in, or do you have to do it manually paper?
Takes me about 5 minutes.
Okay.
Any other public comment? Any comment online?
If you have a comment online, please raise your hand. No one's raising their hand.
All right, any other questions, comments? There you go. Okay. Make a motion, we have to approve it, so I think we have to vote.
I'll make the motion. Resolution number 2026-01.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Sign that now.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Phil, thanks again. So moving on,
You're welcome.
informational items, item number 6A, the 2025 annual report presentation. Presentation, Tim, thank you.
Nicely. Oh, yeah, right. It wasn't too much time here. Yeah. Take a couple hours. This year's annual report is like the last one, but it has a different flavor because, like last year, we were just looking at a year. I think I did the presentation here. 3 to 5 minutes. This year is a little different, just the context, because right on the tails of this report, we're going to actually get our teeth back into GSP. So as we revisit it again with 5-year update, 5-year periodic evaluation. Special day. So we're gonna get back to that. Thank you. And thank you, directors. So the SIGMA regulations are the reason we're here, the whole night for the whole process. But the EWR requirements for annual reports are only covered by 2 pages of regulation. Pretty straightforward. They just require us to report on the recent water here. And the sections are listed here. There's the groundwater elevation reporting, groundwater extraction reporting, ESC, surface water use, total water use, and then the change in groundwater in storage. And then lastly, the progress towards implementing the plan. So it'll be, this is for the period through September of 2025, October 2024 through September 2025. So the period that ended 5 months ago. Okay, it's very narrow. It's not looking at anything bigger than just what happened that year. So we'll look at this pretty quickly. Maybe interrupt me or we can do questions again. This is familiar perhaps. This is the rainfall, long period of record here since 1950. And we're looking at the chart, beautiful colored chart of the different water years that the greens and the blues are the west, greens are the next, dry. Yellow is where we were in 2025. It was a very dry year. It was 7 inches of rain, but it wasn't that critical color because the way it's calculated considers the current year and the prior year. So although we only had 7 inches of rain, which was a very one of the driest, it was still considered a below normal year. Only step below that is critical here. The the western and central management areas for the first time in a while have a different water year classification this year, is how they calculated it by a different method. We're gonna fix that during the periodic evaluation. We've been asked by the DWR to come back and make it all match basin one. And when I say basin, I'm talking about all 3 management areas. And talk about EMA, I'll say EMA. Go back real quick.
Thanks. Yeah, I was just gonna ask, I mean, can you characterize 2026? We've had almost 2 months now. Are we, somewhere near normal or still below normal?
It's looking,
Yeah,
yeah, I've been, pretty myopic on ending in September. It's been a pretty amazing year so far.
Where are we in inches? I think 15.
Inches are the number 7 inches.
We're at 7 year to date.
That was through the end of last water year, 2025.
Where are we though for 26?
We're now pretty much halfway through water year 2026. We're looking pretty good
21.3 and 7, that's what
for the water year.
Yeah.
From 21.3, but it depends on how it calculates the,
Wet.
it's 7 inch year.
124, yeah.
Yeah.
We still could get another storm, so.
Right. We have to show what's been happening since 2015, so that's shown there. It's pretty interesting because since 2015, when the Sigma blocking road, we are pretty close to the long-term average. We're 15.2. The long-term average is 15.8. What does that mean? So the squiggly black line, it doesn't, at the beginning and the end of that, from 2015 to now, it doesn't change much. A lot of dry years, wet years, no strong years. So, it just, I'm just pointing it out. Good. Move on. So we have to, we're required to present both, groundwater contour maps and hydrographs for each of the principal aquifers. Remember the biggest principal aquifer is the Paso Robles formation, and it's showing you the squiggly lines probably don't mean much, but they're used along with the spring from the prior year to figure out how much changed year over year. So that the groundwater generally flows the same direction, north to south towards the river. And they're shown here. The graph on the right is a little new way of looking at it. There's developments on there I should point out to you. There are red lines and green lines. The red lines are the minimum thresholds. The groundwater levels we want to stay below. And then the green line is the measurable objection. My colleague calls those are aspirational goals. The little squares on there are a new thing that hasn't been shown before. Those are called interim milestones. Every 5 years since the plan is adopted, the groundwater levels of each individual well are supposed to be at a certain level. That shows how we're progressing towards sustainability at the end of the 20-year period. Those little very pale squares on the screen are shown here. So we look at where the line is, the water level line is relative to where we think we should be. Now we're coming up on one. It's coming up next year. 2027, I guess. Is where we need to see if we're at that interim milestone. Okay. Yeah, so that's why I'm showing. These are right. A smaller groundwater formation is a principal aquifer is the carbonic sand over on the west side of the basin under Saltburn mostly, and also continuing up to the shared border with the San Antonio groundwater basin. Notably, it has a pretty similar response. That blue line is approaching the red line. It's pretty low. The minimum thresholds are being approached by this blue line. But in these 2 wells that I chose as representative of the representative. So I think we're clear that times The regulations also require that we, describe the groundwater extractions in the two principal aquifers for all water use sectors that are shown here, in comparison. We are required to use the best available measurement methods. And they have their very specific requirements. We have to show the accuracy of the measurements, the general location of the groundwater extractions. And this one shows what's been going on since 2020. And on the right, it shows that we have about 13,000 acre feet of groundwater use. Remember, this is not in the same thing as surface water. This is capitalist, right? It's a little lower than it was in 2020. Talk about any of the individual components, but I wanted to just point out that municipal and reported domestic water use is about 2,000 acre feet a year. Small public water systems on the order of 900. Perspective. Rural domestic water systems were pretty well analyzed this year for the rate study. So that's a pretty good number. Previously, they were based at 315. The prior year was based on estimates from population data, but it was revisited during the rate study mid last year, June of last year. And agriculture is slightly higher. We can talk about that a little bit. Maybe it would be good to talk about how that was estimated if there's interest. If there's interest in how things, the analysis changed a little bit. We'll do that and see if there's any interest in getting into the how it's all calculated there. It's not. I'm not seeing any nothing, so we're good. Let's move on. We're required to show where the location and volume of groundwater extractions are. And we redid this analysis, so it's exactly the same as last year. The pumping is pretty much in the same places. The changes in vineyard acreage that were discussed did show up on the change of this map. So there is a change in water from those acreage, from that acreage, but they didn't show up on this at this scale.
What was the date of the map?
What was that?
What was the date of the map?
This map is the calculation based on the entire water area we can buy
So it would be September,
through September.
yeah. So most of the removals are after that.
Okay, that makes sense, because I remember looking at a lot of the imagery, we didn't see, couldn't tell if any of them were removed from what we see.
Yeah, the new AI data started August 1st.
Okay. The satellite method we used to estimate acreage would have seen the reduction in irrigation. Whether crop was removed or just abandoned in place, would have seen a lower irrigation from the health and outcomes. Good time. They require us to report surface water supply. It comes from the imported and locally diverted water from San Ynez River, shown here. It includes pumping from Solvang 91, as well as all the estimate of the total river level. The surface water data, the quality of the accuracy of it is quite high. So we've been, and the total volume was about 5,600 acre feet a year, which was slightly lower. Sorry, slightly lower than last year. Here, I was nodding or shaking the head here. And it's all like river pumping went down a little. Put the two together, look at groundwater and surface water use value is pretty close to unchanged, 18,800, 18,600 acre feet for water year 2025. How does that compare to the historical period? Well, the historical period, remember that during the GST, we had this period 82 to 2018. And that number in the lower right of 18,600 was about 14,000, so slightly, oh, I'm sorry. The groundwater pumping was 14,000 acre feet. So it's, even though our groundwater pumping has gone down a little bit, the water levels are still declining. Overall, the decline in groundwater and storage is shown here on the squiggly line. It goes unfortunately down to the right since 2015. And it shows it going down during the yellow bar, which is this dry year, below normal year of 2025. Since 2015, the overall decline has been about 27,000 acre feet of decline since that time. And just, so it's not just a calculation based on water budget. The water levels tell the exact same story about the same magnitude of change. If you compare the average water levels from that period to this period, it's about right. So tool seems to be pretty well calibrated based on this. So the periodic evaluation will see we need to make changes to the policies, but this is just the science. Okay. Thank you, Charlotte. The volume of groundwater storage during the year decreased by about 12,500 acre feet a year during this year. And it pretty closely, that decline pretty closely matches other dry years like 2021, 1984, 89, 2005, 2007. During those dry years that had on the order of 6, 7, 8 inches of rain, there's also a similar drop, a decline in groundwater storage of 10,000, 15,000 acre feet a year. So this basin does respond pretty well to the changes in rain. The groundwater extractions don't change much, but the recharge from rain sure does. So just when you're thinking about rainfall, because it's so important, I think I said this last year, increases in groundwater storage happen when annual rainfall exceeds about 17 inches a year. Seeing that we get above 17 inches a year, groundwater storage is gone. Now, this is where we get to things that we're going to expand on this in the periodic evaluation, the 5-year update. But right now, it's really hard to see, but there's a lot of greens up here. Greens are good. Looking at it from the side, and things like colors, but there are numbers that are under 50%, which means that we have not caused undesirable results as defined in our DSP, right? We get over 50% of the water levels below the minimum thresholds that are representative wells for each aquifer. We have, by definition, in our GSP, triggered undesirable result. Decision. The 2 consecutive years requirement for these has been questioned by DWR, so we're going to revisit that. We can't use a water year type to get out of the decline of water levels. Can't use that as an excuse. We're going to come back and how we address that together. These values were fine. We haven't seen that desirable results. Though, draw your attention to the top of the chart. Right after the GSP was GSP period, there was 0% of the wells were below these red lines, right? And these numbers are still below 50, generally below 50% of their risk. Right. So the GSA has been up to a lot. These meetings are long because you're accomplishing a lot and doing a lot of good work. It's nice to see them all in one place to see what the GSA can accomplish. I think the reporting has been going on as required. The rate study is complete. Periodic evaluation is underway. We actually have started redoing the modeling. We've started some work on that. We'll start engaging with you all very soon. The water efficiency strategic plan. I haven't heard of that by name recently. Hasn't been the forefront of my mind. But, enhanced survey for potential GDEs has been in front of us. We have identified data gaps. We are putting in monitoring wells and piezometers to figure out what's going on with the groundwater levels in places outside of Oregon. registering and metering wells, reporting meter production are underway, and other green checkbox for implementing a revenue generating fee program that's underway, so that's having ourselves on the back there. And then, developing new and expanding existing water use efficiency programs is been implemented here, so. Great. Yeah, those are all great, so we're gonna move forward, that is where we are, what we've done so far, so what's next? The tonight's meeting introduces the EMA's portion of this report, which is being put together into a basin-wide report. Our sections, EMA sections are across there, in that report. And then there'll be a joint meeting on March 13th to approve the joint annual report. And then we have a little bit of time if there's any suggested changes or any kind of tweaks that gets submitted to the DWR by the end of March. I say April 1st, but I never want to submit it on April 1st, just wait.
That's not.
And then we're gonna move into continuing our preparation of the periodic evaluation. We have an extension of the deadline to do that. We have the grant funding to spend that to do this work, so it's been deprioritized a little bit. You know, the other report things, right? So that is the part of the annual report.
And continue.
Could you comment on this new SB bill that went through?
Which one?
It was just in the news today about a 9-year.
What about it?
The governor signed, the bill passed earlier this week, and the governor signed an emergency effort, a 9-year plan for sourcing additional water from California for long range. I read the news release. I couldn't figure out exactly what they were intending. I thought maybe you might know.
I didn't read about that yet. Okay. I heard something about it. Anybody else doing work out this year? You know the source of the one?
I know the article was very vague. The people who were quoted weren't really clear on how they were how it was going to get achieved. I was trying to understand it, but
Okay. Well, maybe it'll come up again. Maybe it'll a better journalist will write about it.
Yeah.
Actually read it. Order.
Any more questions for Tim? Thank you. I guess we'll see you again on the 13th. Sure. All right, we'll move on to 6B. Prop 68 grant update.
Yeah, so this one, hopefully, I'll keep it short, but ready to answer any questions. Working on a number of initiatives that you've seen come through on the agenda packets. And then we're gonna have at the March 6th, March 13th joint meeting, sort of a more comprehensive update of the Prop 68 grant tasks. So we thought we'd spare that up here. So open for questions, but no real updates. All right, we'll give you more updates here in a couple of weeks.
Okay, so the next last one will be the 13th.
Yeah.
Details, okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any concerns on tracking or project help, anything that we?
No, I will say, and actually even before coming to this meeting, we just met with City Saldang and got an encroachment permit executed for one of the piezometers. So that's an exciting milestone. I think we've got to agreement with the property owner for the other piezometer. And actually, we've got conceptual agreement with third property owner for the monitoring well installation. So, easements and property acquisition can be one of the challenging things, most challenging things from a schedule perspective. And I feel like we're on a good track and almost to the finish line on all three of us.
Questions for Dan? Okay, moving on. Item C. Agricultural trends, I think this is an example of agenda impact. This is a good one. Dan, did you want to introduce it or do you?
Well, Director Circle had shared some information with me that I thought was informative. And actually we shared this information with the CAG and I think they appreciate it as well. So we thought it would be informative to share with the board. So I'll turn it over to Director Circle.
So Land IQ is an AI platform that's measuring specifically wine grapes across the state and when they're being removed. I'm sure the data is probably, since it's a fairly new program, started August 1st, but it is pretty granular. You can see back here, I highlighted some of the ones that are within the EMA would be Happy, Beach District. Ones where for particular interest, and then the Santa Barbara County shows the acreage going down, or I think graph shows kind of what's happened over time. And so I brought it up to Dan because I think it's interesting. In the GSP, we had assumed planting continuing as it had in some prior years, and the economics of what's driving those removals, and so you can see them around town and in other counties if you drive through. And so I think there'll be very little, really the only replacement vineyards would likely be, for sort of lifestyle type opportunities, because the market, not going to drive. The cost of planting a vineyard has gone up substantially in the last 6 years, with steel and plastic, and the price of grapes has gone down. So I don't think we'll probably see commercial vineyards being planted in the near term, but we should just keep our eye on it in terms of our budget. That's my thought. Happy to answer any questions.
Doug, when I saw that, I didn't know what it was about, so it got me real curious. So I Googled, how come wine grapes, what's happening? And what I came back was the decline in consumption. People just aren't drinking wine anymore. There's been a glut of wine grapes on the market, even globally. It's a huge glut. So it looks like, when people do futures and stuff, they bet on the company. Well, it looks like they bet wrong because people change their demand, desire. They're not drinking wine. And the younger people are wanting healthier drinks. It's all the stuff I Googled. This is what came back. And they're even saying vineyards are removed to right size because it's an adjustment of the market, how adjustments happen. And I thought that was interesting. Then I have a friend that grows table grapes. So I talked to him and he goes, no, table grapes are booming. They're going. Everybody's, there's a high demand for table grapes now. It's like 20% increase. So, I don't know if our land can't grow table grapes, but I mean, it looks like that's where it's at, right?
Yeah. Unfortunately, we can't really grow table grapes here. It's the nighttime temperatures are cooler than, the same reasons that make really good quality wines from this region prevent us from having table grapes. So quality, they're generally grown in the desert areas and Bakersfield or Central.
Right, Central
Valley. Parts on the East Paso side, but all the reasons that you said,
Tariffs and there was just an agricultural forum yesterday with the North County Econ Alliance, and they explained that it's not the tariffs per se, but it's Canada is a big importer of our wine, and the consumer perception is not good right now, and so they're not importing.
Canada consumes 17% of California wine, and that went to nearly zero when we aggravated them. But it's, I don't think it's going to change, anytime soon. But kind of the right sizing with lower consumption. We need about 3.2 million tons to meet demand. And we've had years in the past, that have been over 400 million tons. The last 2 years have been the smallest. Last year was the smallest number of tons in 45 years. But it was primarily because people couldn't sell their grapes and they didn't harvest them. So But I mean, all that to say, whatever we thought was going to be an increase over the next 20 years in our GSP is probably not going to happen.
You use an interesting phrase though. Is it right sizing or is it a downward trend? Because I poured through this data. I really appreciate that we got it. But I saw two places where the removed acreage was greater than 10% of the standing acreage, Fresno and San Joaquin, which you wouldn't expect, like maybe you would expect it in Napa or, Paso. But, is it just a trimming or is it a downward slope?
Well, so those two counties, San Joaquin and Fresno are the least expensive. The least expensive wine grapes are grown in those two regions that go into the least expensive wines, which has shown the biggest decline in sales. So that's why those two, have outsized reductions. But it's across the board. In every region, as you can see in the report.
So there was one other thing, I was curious what the insight would be. The thing that jumped out at me, 2024 was our smallest revenue year since in the last 20 years. At 70 million.
2025 and 2025 is less.
It's even less. So, okay, so that was concerning because it looks, but even from 23 to 24, we lost only, I don't know what unit it is. I'm gonna say 1,000 acres, 1,000 acre tons. And the revenue went down 28 million. We can't find another pattern of that substantial revenue loss to a relatively small acreage loss.
Yeah.
So what happened?
I mean, so in 2020 with COVID, there was a false demand signal that went to the marketplace. People were drinking at home, they were working from home, they were, FedEx driver here.
I thought we were gonna die.
FedEx driver here came to my house and said, if it wasn't for wine deliveries, I wouldn't have any deliveries, during the heart of COVID. And so that demand was extrapolated by the wine industry and they planted more acres to meet that demand. And that demand was a false demand as everyone knows. And in some cases, people had health issues that caused them to quit drinking. And so this decline in consumption, this is really, I've been doing this a while, I've had oversupply years that we get through pretty quickly, but with a lack of demand, this is the first time the demand has been really driving, the market conditions. And so two things happened. People didn't sell their grapes at all. And so there was no revenue from those and grape prices have gone down. So.
Yeah, okay. So it's a drastic pricing correction.
It'll correct, we'll get to an equilibrium. There was 550,000 acres of grapes in California. Over the last 24 months, I think that about 90,000 and up to 37,000 since last August. So eventually we're supply will equal the demand and they don't see it incentivizing people to plant more.
What's the, Dan shared this data. So the good news is, here's an example of how we can make the topics work. So when Dan shared it, we need the information about how this land is getting repurposed. Or, we can go back to ag teams or ag organizations, associations and have them give us those insights. But one other place to go get these insights would be, what are these landowners doing with when they're pulling the vines out? How are they remarketing their land for resale? Is it marketing for agriculture or, something else? It'd be interesting to see how to get ahead of or get the insights early on what will happen with unused.
Yeah, well, it's an astute question. Right now, there's, the wine business is having this, so are almonds and pistachios and citrus and table grapes are doing better. The vegetable guys have had a challenging period. So there's a lot of agricultural land all up and down the coast, as well as other areas in California that's just not selling based on, these areas of uncertainty. If alternative crops emerge, that might change land value, but, in some places you've got, some places could have alternative crops if the ground's flat, but a lot of wine grapes are grown on rolling hills and that's not suitable for most, vegetables and other crops. The other interesting thing was I asked a couple of hay guys to do a study as to what, sets another crop in our region. And so our water pumping fees have raised order of magnitude a bale of hay in about $1.75 per bale is the increased water cost. And that is actually eclipsing the price of hay delivered from areas that have, less expensive farming costs where they're buying hay. And so over time, we might see some less hay being grown because they can buy it, for equal to or less than. Now, some people, that we've asked about the hay situation are not really paying attention to exactly what their costs are. So that's interesting. We need to study it. So their families have been raising hay for years and they already own the equipment and so forth. They may not, appreciate their equipment the way the cost is, but that's another one for us to watch.
These AI platforms, do they do price tolerances analysis?
Well, I'm sure they can do about anything if you can get the prompt correct.
Really what the data is, okay.
There's but this is strictly an acreage. This was undertaken by the California Wine Grape Growers Association, and they organized all of APN numbers that had grapes growing, and so they're tracking those, and then they're vetting their data with the local wine associations like the Santa Barbara Vendors Association to be sure their data is correct. So it's a tool for us to use.
No, I think it's good information. I like it. And if you can continue to bring us agriculture information, maybe this land is good for something else and they're going to shift to this crop. And that crop uses so much water per acre.
Yeah.
Those are the things I think are important. If you can keep bringing those in, that'd be good.
Will do.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, so, we aren't really approving anything. Would you like to make a comment?
I just want to point out, how much sustainability plan estimated what ag water use would be in 20 years, 50 years. And our estimates were that ag water use would be exactly the same. Ag water use would not increase. Right now, we're down 18% from where we were in the historic period, where we thought we were going to be in 2022, 2072. So this is all, it is what it is, but we are GSP projected more ag water use than we have now.
Was that a correction that you made, Tim, though? Because I remember that the construct of the study, this is going back several years, was that they wanted to add in some additional bias of usage of water, like in the 2070 out years. So I don't think that bias is going to be realized based on what we've just talked about.
Well, yeah, there were two parts of understanding Dr. Moving. One was the change in cropping, which is what we're talking about here. But then the other is the change in climate change related changes. There were two sets of climate changes, and they had to be, the DWR required us to include both. So, yeah, and the climate has been even drier, and some people would argue warmer than they predicted.
Near-term weather, but I mean,
Right.
we got aggregate for a long period, so it's to be determined.
We'll talk about longer periods or the period of evaluation.
Okay.
I just wanted to put it in perspective, plan and where we thought we would be.
Good insight. Thank you. All right, Dan, coming up to the last couple of topics on the agenda, item 7, what's coming up on future meetings?
Yeah, so joint meeting, March 13th at 9 a.m. in Gilpin City Council Chambers, important meeting. Make sure we have a quorum there. We need to approve the annual report for submission to DWR. At this point, I don't think we have any other agenda topics specifically to the EMA. So, but if something significant comes up, we may take advantage of that opportunity, but not a lot of time between now and then. So, okay. Then the next regularly scheduled board meeting is March 26th. I likely have a conflict for that date, and we may also be in a position to skip a meeting, considering we met January, February. So I would propose that I work with the chair, sort of determine the need for it. If we need one, we'll schedule it a different day, or we may consider canceling that
I'll
meeting.
make a comment on that too, Dan. If you all recall, we came back on this special schedule meeting, so we could address a single topic. We asked for add more things to the agenda so that we could cover it on. So Dan could take this vacation and maybe we could go back to what looks like or feels like once a quarter. So I'm in favor of skipping the next meeting because we tipped off a lot of agenda topics today. Any objection?
I'm not available on that day either. But you're,
And I'm not available either, but Steve is, so. But you don't want me, so it doesn't matter.
I think I would make a recommendation that we skip the 26th with the proviso that if we needed to, we could help.
Right.
Okay, bless you.
Let's see.
I'm okay with that, and I think that's our direction.
You got
yeah.
Maybe we should not take it, if you're not taking a vacation, that.
It's spring break, so.
I'd like to ask that everybody drink more wine. Would be very helpful.
Last point on the CAG, because I think you made the CAG promotion the other day. Very good.
Yeah, so then the next regular scheduled CAG meeting would be April 16th, and so, you know, that might be appropriate at that time to have a meeting CAG in preparation for the May board.
Perfect. Thank you. And then, last point, which is our opportunity to raise future agenda items. Any needs?
Yeah, looking at Matt, is May too soon to hear how good the news is with respect to precipitation and all the water? Is that and recharge too, in particular? 'Cause I know you sample twice a year and I'm thinking coming out of this winter/spring and maybe by May, we should have a presentation from you just saying where we're at.
So we do our spring run in March. So we will provide that data to GSI and to Confluence. And they can prepare a presentation analyzing that. We're gathering data presenting to the GSA.
Okay.
But it's likely that all of this rain it does take longer for the water to get in. You wouldn't expect it to be up dramatically. It would be the next one to really show it. Is that right?
Typically, we'll see response in areas closer to recharge areas, so along near stream beds, shallower wells, and some of the deeper wells, and the more upland wells will have a slower response.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Good. All right, we'll move on. I think that's our meeting for the night. Well, at 6:28.